Moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the very first time has responded to allegations of an Indian planned assassination plot in the US. Now, he said that he will, quote, look into any evidence, but a few incidents will not derail the US-India ties. Remember, US had recently accused India of an assassination plot against separatist group Sikhs for Justice chief Gurpatwant Pannun. US federal prosecutors have already charged a 52-year-old man of working with an Indian government employee in this foiled plot, according to them. Earlier in August, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had also alleged that there was a potential involvement of Indian agents in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who's another separatist leader earlier based in Canada. Canada has refused to share any evidence or information yet on those claims, though, but India has now responded and acknowledged both of those claims coming from Canada and US. Let me first just break down what Prime Minister Modi said to Financial Times on Pannun's alleged murder plot. So he has said, if someone gives us any information, we will look into it. This is a reiteration of what the MEA earlier has said. Prime Minister asserted that India is committed to the rule of law. He added that ties with US are strengthening and few incidents will not derail it. This is possibly his most important statement. He's also, of course, gone on to talk about multilateralism, that security and counter-terrorism has been a key component of India-US ties. And he said that India has set up a high-level panel to investigate the matter, which shows the seriousness of the Indian agencies, and that he would take necessary follow-up action on the same. But he also used this opportunity to highlight the K menace in both US and Canada that India has been raising for many, many years now, and particularly in the shadow of these allegations. So message number one, that K elements are engaging in intimidation. Remember, there have been threats against our diplomats and attacks on Indian missions, and they've been inciting violence. They make messages that ask people to take up arms in India, for example. Message 2, deeply concerned about anti-India activities taking place in what can be termed as friendly countries today, especially US and Canada. And message number 3, that propaganda is being spewed under the guise of freedom of expression. So now that the Prime Minister has reiterated all of these messages, will US and Canada act on this K threat is the big question we're asking our guests coming up.
Hello, Moto.
Let's go across to our experts joining us. Dr. Tara Karta is former director, NSCS, and Terry Mulusky is author of one of the most preeminent books on the Khalistan movement in Canada. Terry, I want to come to you. How reassuring would be this message from the Prime Minister? It has been given to Financial Times, read globally. He has said we are willing to look into it, and we've already set up a high-powered panel for this. Will this be reassuring to both US and Canada?
Mildly so. I think this is a small step. It's a step forward in the right direction. The Prime Minister is acknowledging and addressing personally these allegations, which he hasn't done before. He's been a sort of in a cocoon on this story, other than endorsing the overall statement that originally came from the Foreign Ministry that this was an absurd allegation in the case of Prime Minister Trudeau's allegation that Canada believed that government agents of the Indian government were linked to the killing, the actual killing, not the threatened killing, of Mr. Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, June the 18th. So I think now he is saying, look, we're deeply concerned. That's great. That's why I think it is a positive step forward. However, what's he deeply concerned about? He hastens to emphasize, does he not, that what he's deeply concerned about is the activities of extremist groups overseas acting against India. He doesn't say he's deeply concerned about what India is plotting to do to these extremist groups.
But that's alleged.
He hasn't.
The alleged plotting.
It's alleged, except that Mr. Nijjar is genuinely dead.
Yeah, he may be dead, but the allegations about the Indian involvement is still alleged. And he has said, and he has reiterated that we want to look at what these countries can provide to us. What is it that they can put on the table to actually give us, to take this forward?
And I agree with you that that's a fair question to ask, because in Mr. Trudeau's case, he has given no reason for confidence that Canada knows what it's talking about. And he claims that he has reasons why he can't reveal the evidence, it doesn't want to jeopardize the trial and so forth. I don't think those reasons are particularly convincing at all, and I think it's a failure on Mr. Trudeau's part to have given no evidence to back up his allegations. But the fact is that the Americans have, and it's the same plot. The Americans are alleging not just that there was a plot against Pannun, but that the same plot by the same plotters with a prominent Indian government connection brought about the death of Mr. Nijjar.
I get what you're saying, but it's very difficult for the common public to really understand what happens behind the curtains of diplomacy and the shadowy world that we're talking about, because there are also reports, for example, that this so-called accused nabbed by US has also filed in Indian court an affidavit or an application which is making very serious charges of the circumstances in which he was arrested or taken hostage, for example. So I'm not getting into the facts of either side, just focusing purely on the relationship between the countries involved here. Tarakarta, what the Prime Minister also said and reiterated, close on the heels of what the Home Minister has said a few days ago, is that in India, we don't really have a policy of this kind. We believe in rule of law. Because rule of law is what Mr. Trudeau was accusing India of not following. He used that term a lot of times. The Prime Minister has reiterated, we believe in rule of law. How do you look at his statement? Particularly, there was some commentary on how this episode could derail this bonhomie between India and US. I think the Prime Minister is sending a message that that's not going to be the case for those who may be looking forward to that.
I think it's a very important statement by the Prime Minister, and I'm so glad he said it when he did. Like to say, like say President Biden saying that this is the most consequential relationship. Presidents and prime ministers don't throw out these statements lightly. So when the Prime Minister says we are deeply concerned, that means something. We are deeply concerned about what's going on. So he's sending, plus also he chose to say that, look, if there is we've handled the US charges very differently from the Canadian shouting,
charges,
right?
Yes.
Absolutely differently handled. And to give the US credit, they've also handled it very differently. They've chosen not to go to town except for that unsealing of the indictment, which is part of US law. And they did that. Second thing, what I also many a time felt that this is being overplayed, because there is so much. I mean, just read the last 2+2 statement, between the two sides. It is huge. It covers every single aspect that we can think of in terms of our objectives. Forget China and the rest for the moment. I mean, put that aside. Your plan for Atmanirbhar with US technology, we've already got, in fact, I think it was on the technology initiative.
Right.
We've got a couple of things going already. I mean, this is all moving fast. You just had the military exercise, Vajra Prahar, in Himachal. That's just about wound up. So, in the background, India-US ties are going on.
Absolutely. So, anybody salivating on the prospect that this could derail that is possibly being misled. But I have limited time, unfortunately, so I want to ask very quickly to Terry also. What the Indian agencies, the Indian ministry and now the Prime Minister have also done very successfully is they've also shined a light that, okay, you want us to act on what these quote-unquote Indian agents may do. You also pay heed to our concerns. There has to be reciprocal action here, which has not been forthcoming either in the case of Canada or even in the case of US. For example, on Pannun, there should not even be a question of whether he should be extradited to India or not.
Yes, I think it's a very important point that that both sides, to be fair, have downplayed where the finger points at them.
Yes.
The Canadians are full of indignation about what they allege the Indians have been responsible for in plotting this a whole killing spree against Khalistani leaders. But they have said very little about Canada's role for 40 years now in ignoring, looking the other way, not taking seriously Indian concerns. Right, going back to the time of the Kanishka bombing and the failure to extradite the mastermind of that bombing in 1985, Talvida Parmar. He killed 331 completely innocent civilians.
Yes.
And before that, 3 years before that, India wanted his extradition. Canada said no, didn't want to get involved in Indian squabbles. Well, that was a failure, and that failure was reflected in many similar failures in the years that followed. So I think the conclusion is that both sides, certainly the Canadian side, is going to have to acknowledge that there's problems at home.
That they need to take care of as well. 30 seconds to
And I think
Tarakata
the
as well.
Americans recognize
Will
the
US
same.
also take very seriously what Pannu has been up to? Is it time now for them to do so?
I think they
I
will,
do
because
believe that
this,
they will. I think,
whatever it is, the end
if
result
you,
is that
I'm sorry.
Pannun has come up front, right? The whole Khalistan issue has come up front.
Yes.
So they're going to have to do something, particularly after Prime Minister's statement. I think we will see some action. But what I'm trying to say is that the real issues between us is something like the data protection law. Those
Yes.
are issues which are important for us.
Yeah.
Pannun is I hesitate to use strong language on TV. I should be dealt with. I mean, he's high time. That's all.
Okay, I leave it at that. I think better sense will prevail on that, hopefully. Certainly between India and US. I'm not so sure about Canada because, those things have been depending on a lot of other things.